going to be on raising market broilers for you to exhibit at shows. The key points that we're going to talk about in this unit are ordering your broilers for a specific show, the shelter that your broilers need, feeding programs, culling, age of broilers, and picking your broilers out for the show. Ordering your broilers. This is the most important part of broiler raising for youth to exhibit at a show. You want to make sure that you get with your ag teacher if you're an FFA member, or your county extension agent if you're a 4-H member, and get the deadlines and know the deadlines and when the entry forms are due for each show that you're interested in showing your birds at. There is a deadline for ordering your birds, and there's also a deadline to enter the show. So make sure that you know each of those two deadlines for each of the shows that you want to show your broilers at, because each show has they have a specific time and a specific location that you pick up your broilers, because all exhibitors pick up their broilers for the show at the exact same place and the exact same time. So it's very important that you have your deadlines and you can really communicate with your ag teacher and your county extension agent. The shelter for your birds is important also. You want to make sure that whatever structure that you have for your birds and what you're going to use is secure from any varmints. This includes snakes, skunks, cats, anything that wants to get chickens. You can see that there's baby chicks, and these are tiny, these are big enough, these are small enough for snakes to eat. And also when they get bigger, cats and skunks, armadillos, things like that really like to get a hold of chickens. So make sure that your structure is very secure from any varmints and outside life that could harm your birds. And also the weather. If it's going to ice, you want to make sure that you're secure from ice storms, from rain, from really hot weather, direct sunlight. So just make sure your structure is very secure from those two things. You also want to make sure if you're going to use air conditioning or fans, and also heaters. When the birds are young, they're going to need a hot environment, a warm environment. So heaters may want to be used, especially for the San Antonio Livestock Show and the Houston Livestock Show. This is usually in the winter time in Texas, and sometimes it does get cold. In some places it does snow and it does ice over. So you want to make sure that your birds are comfortable and at the particular temperature that they need to be at. And sometimes heaters are needed. Air conditioning would be needed in if you're raising birds for the state fair and other county shows that are in the summer and the fall time, where it's really hot and it's really getting above the 80 to 100 degree weather, because as birds get older, you want to keep them cool and comfortable. The more comfortable birds are, the more they're going to eat and the more meat they're going to produce on their body. You also want to make sure that this space and shelter is expandable for the birds to grow. You want to make sure that the biggest part of the area, the most you can expand it, is at least 1 square foot of space for each adult bird that you're going to have. And normally when you pick up your birds the day of the show, you're going to start out with anywhere from 25 birds to 75 birds. And these chicks, they're 1 day old. We'll talk about this a little later on. But depending on the show and depending on your own personal preference of how many chicks you have. And as they get older, you're going to cull your birds. You're going to have less birds. But for your adult-sized birds, you want to make sure that you have enough space for 1 square foot for each adult bird. This is very important to prevent overcrowding. When the birds are a lot younger, you're going to combine their space more so that they don't get lost. They can find their feeders and their waters very well, and they know where they are. So you're going to expand it as the birds grow and get them more comfortable. The lighting. You want to make sure that the shelter that you have is able to provide light 24 hours a day. So you may need a totally enclosed structure with lights. It could be an outside structure, but you want to make sure that when nightfall does happen, that light is never taken off the birds, because birds eat when the light is on. So when the light is off, you know that your birds are not eating and they're not producing any more meat. So it's very important to have the light on them. When the chicks are small, you're going to want heat lamps on them. You're going to receive the chicks at 1 to 2 days of age. At this time, you're going to have to keep them in heat lamps in a confined space so that they can huddle together. Baby chicks need to be at a temperature in their environment of 90 to 95 degrees, mostly on the 95-degree part. So if you need to do heaters, however you need to change your temperature and keep your temperature constant, it's very important. As the chicks get a little older, as the weeks progress, each week you're going to drop the temperature down by 5 degrees. And so as the birds get bigger, that's when the heat lamps aren't going to be used. So you want to make sure that you can have those heat lamps whenever they're needed. The bedding that should be used could be pine shavings, rice hulls, or peanut hulls. Most people do use pine shavings because it's easier and more convenient to get. The bedding needs to be changed at least once a week or once every 2 weeks. The shavings do need to be turned over once to twice a day because the feces and ammonia that is excreted from the birds, you really want to make sure that it's as fresh as it can be for the chickens. The feeding program. There's a lot of feeding programs out there. Your ag teacher or your county extension agent may want you to use a particular feeding program, but the most basic is what's shown here on your screen. The three different kinds of feed that you can get either get pellets, crushed, or mashed. Especially when your chicks are 1 day of age, you want to start with mashed or crushed. If you want to move to pellets, it's completely up to you and whatever is more comfortable for your birds. You do want to make sure that birds have access to food 24 hours a day. You never want your chickens to ever run out of food. This is very important in raising broilers for show to do your best and to succeed. You want to continue to raise the feeders to the height of the bird's neck as the birds continue to grow. As the birds get bigger, they'll start to step in feeders, tip them over, contaminate the food with their feces and the pine shavings. So you want to keep just raising the feeders and make sure that they're adjustable so to keep the food as clean as possible. And this also goes with the waters also. You also want to raise the waters to the neck to keep the waters clean. The different kind of feeds that you're going to use, that first from 1 to 2 weeks, you're going to go from a high protein food to a low protein food. From the 1 to 2 weeks of age, you're going to use a turkey starter, which is around the 30% protein range. The percent of protein just depends on who your provider of feed is and what kind you're going to use. So you want about the 30% protein range. For the remainder of the time, from the 2 to 6 week period, you want to use a broiler complete, which is around the 22.5% protein range, to lower the protein a little bit, but you still want that high protein to make sure that they are getting as much meat on their body as they can. Culling. This is a concept to decrease the amount of birds that's in your pen, because once birds get behind, if they're smaller than all the other birds, they're never going to catch up by the show time. So you can get rid of these birds. If you see that you have a runt, get rid of it. It will never catch up to the bigger birds. And the bigger birds are what you're interested in and what you want. You want to start definitely culling the birds when you can tell, when the sex can be determined. The sex can be determined by the comb. On cockerels, it's going to be a lot bigger. It's going to be a lot more prominent. On pullets, it's going to be a pale pink, and you're not going to be able to see it that much. You'll definitely be able to tell. So on different shows, they break it up between a pullet show and a cockerel show. And you get to choose if you want to show one or the other of your pins. So depending on if you know that you want to go into a show and you want to show cockerels, then once you can tell that you have pullets in your pen, you can then get rid of them and you can process them. And the processing is going to be in our Unit 3. But if you're going to the show and you just want pullets, then get rid of your cockerels. There's no reason to keep feeding these birds and pushing these birds if you know you're not even going to use them. You can normally tell the sex of the birds about 3 weeks of age. It just depends. You then want to cull at the 4th, 5th, and the 6th week and just keep downsizing your birds. You don't want to downsize them too much because you will lose birds for natural reasons. But in the early weeks, you can cull them by weight and by their size. But by the 5th and 6th week, you do want to fill their breasts in what is a more meaty bird, what has the most meat yield. The age of the broilers. Like I mentioned earlier, you do receive them at 1 day of age, and they're shown around 6 weeks of age or around 52 days of age. And this is because in the industry, broilers are processed between 5 and 6 weeks of age, and this is because of the meat yield and the quality of the meat at this time. This is the prime time to process birds to get the best meat and the best quality meat that you can. So that's when shows are going to want you to exhibit their birds, because they're showing you a small scale of what the industry does. Picking your broilers for the show. At each show, a pen of broilers would be a pen of 3 birds that are shown. You want these 3 birds to be the most alike that they can, but in those 3, you want them to be the biggest birds, the birds that have the longest and the widest breasts, that have the most meat yield. So the three biggest birds in your pen that have the biggest breast. The breast is normally what judges are looking for. You want to bring those 3 birds, and you want those 3 birds to be uniform and the most alike as you can. You're almost wanting identical triplets. You don't want to just take your top 3 birds to the show. You at least want to take 5 to 6 birds to the show, just in case you lose them during transport or one breaks a wing or something happens. You want to make sure you have some extra birds that you can trade in if you need to. That concludes our unit for raising broilers for show. The next unit is going to be on processing birds and the difference between the industry processing and how you can process your own birds that you're culling that you're going to exhibit for your show.